Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture on inheritance in Java. So as we had discussed earlier that one of the three pillars of object-oriented programming is inheritance. So let us see why we need inheritance and what exactly it is. So we have seen that one of the reasons why we have moved towards object-oriented programming as opposed to structured programming is because, or procedure-oriented programming is because we would like to go for reuse of the code. We'd like to write lesser amount of code so that we don't have to keep on repeating the same code again and again in different places. And one of the way of implementing this is through the use of inheritance. So it implements a form of reuse of the software, reuse of code. And what it does is that it allows us to create new classes from existing classes. So I already have a class. I want to create a class which is similar to this existing class but has got some additional features or has some features which are different. So instead of creating this new class from scratch by duplicating the existing class and adding new features, I can incorporate the concept of inheritance to create this new class from my existing class through inheritance. So what this new class will contain is, when we inherit, it will contain all features of the existing class, and then it will have some additional features or some features which are not there in the existing class. So you can think of the existing class to be a more general class, and then your new class or the inherited class to be something which is you can say more specialized class. So inheritance acts as something like this. So here I have a superclass or an existing class. There are different terminologies which are used. Some call it the superclass, some places it is called the base class. So you have an existing class, and then you derive a subclass from it, which is again also termed as the derived class. So the subclass inherits from the superclass. So the superclass will contain the common features, okay, which is also there in the subclass, and the subclass will contain only the features which are there in the subclass but not in the superclass. And this is known as, we say that in Java, we say that the subclass extends the superclass. If you look at the English meaning of extend, it means it gives something more to the superclass. So the subclass extends the superclass. So, and this relationship of inheritance between the subclass and the superclass, you can term it as a relationship between the objects. So an object of the subclass is an object of the superclass. So if I say my superclass is, say, car, okay, then I have, or say vehicle, if I say vehicle is my superclass, then I can say I can have a subclass called car. I can have another subclass called, say, trucks. I can have another subclass called bus, because all three of these are what? These are all vehicles. So a car is a vehicle, a truck is a vehicle, a bus is a vehicle. So the relationship between the subclass and the superclass is that it is a relationship. And what happens is that a superclass or a subclass, it inherits all the fields By fields I mean the data members and methods of the superclass. So whatever is there in the data members, methods are there in the superclass is inherited by the subclass. But there is one catch, the constructors are not inherited. So we'll talk about this later. So just to recap again, I have an existing class which is a superclass. It contains some features, that is your data members and methods. I want to create a more specialized class of this. So I will create a new class called the subclass. And in the subclass, I will not repeat what is there already in the superclass. I will keep only the things which are there in the superclass, but not in the which are not there in the superclass and which are there only in the subclass. Okay, so this is known as your inheritance. This is an example. Using inheritance, what we can do is we can create class hierarchies. So you can have a hierarchy of classes. This inheritance is not restricted to one single level. You can have multiple levels of inheritance. So as you can see here, at the top I have community member. So if you think of this as a class, so community member is something very vague. So it's very general. It can be anybody. So here we are talking about community member in a, say, a college or a university. Okay, so anybody that is associated with the college or the university is a community member. So this is something very vague. So but everybody associated, every person associated with the community would have a name, would have an address, would have a phone number. So these can be features of the community member class. Now we want to have more specialized groupings or classes, groupings of the classes. So I create a class called employee, okay, which is a community member. So it has all the features of a community member. That means it has a first name, a last name, a phone number, an address, okay, but it has got something more. What does it have? If the person is a employee, then he will have an employee ID. He or she will have an employee ID. He or she will have a designation. He or she will belong to a particular department. Okay, so these are features: the employee ID, the department, the designation. These are specific only to employee. These are not features of community members. So whatever is there in community member will also be there in employee, plus it will have something of its own. Similarly, we have another class here, student. Now what is there in employee is not there in student. Student is again different, but a student is also a community member. So a student will also have a first name, last name, address, phone number. Plus a student will have a roll number. The student may have a department to which he or she belongs to, okay, may have a course which the student is taking. All right, so this is again another inheritance, community member and student. So student is a community member, employee is a community member. The same also goes for alumnus, so somebody who has already passed out from the community. So what additional things the alumnus will have? It will have say an alumni ID or something if he or she is registered to the alumni association. He or she will have the year of passing. He or she will have which course they took. Okay, so alumnus is again different from student, but alumnus is also a community member. So you have a hierarchy like this: community member, so employee inherits from community member, student inherits from community member, alumnus inherits from community member. So all three of these, employee, alumnus and student, they get all the features of community members, plus they have their own features. Now this hierarchy can go on up to many levels. That's why what you can see in this diagram is a multi-level hierarchy. So an employee again now can be either a faculty, a teaching faculty, or it can be a non-teaching faculty, so a staff. So faculty or staff. So if an employee is a faculty, then he or she will have some qualification or some classes which he or she is taking. Okay, if it is a staff, then staff will have some things like something which are not there for faculty, like say designation will be there for faculty also. Something like some particular section, which office he or she is working on. Okay, so there are some features, but both faculty and staff are both employees. Again, another level of the hierarchy, I may have a faculty who is an administrator, say the head of the department. So we may have some faculty who are not teaching, who are only doing administration. And then there are teachers. So teachers will have which class the teacher is teaching. Administrator will have some other designations and so on. So this multi-level hierarchies can go on and on. Okay, but just think of it, if you did not have inheritance, in that case everything that you have here will have to be repeated in each and every of these classes. So you can see here, administrator is getting some additional information from faculty, the data members of faculty is coming to administrator, data members of employees coming to faculty, data members of community members is coming to employee. So ultimately administrator is getting the data from where? It's getting from faculty, from employee and from community member. So if these things were not there, then you would have to repeat all these informations, the data members and the methods in each of these classes. So we can say that inheritance helps us to reduce the amount of code and reuse the code which is already present. So this is an example. You can see community member has got what? Constructor and accessors. Those are your get methods. And then it has got first name, last name, address and one method called display detail. Employee class has got constructor, date of joining, basic salary and a method called compute salary. So employee, since it is inheriting from community member, it is getting all these data members, first name, last name, address, display details. All these are coming to employee from the community member. So if this inheritance was not there, then I will have one class community member full with all these details, and employee also will have to have first name, last name, address, display details in its own inside the class. And similarly, student also would have all these features along with roll number and the major subject. So we can see how class hierarchies will help you reduce the duplication of code by factoring out common code from similar classes into a similar superclass. So now let us look at the syntax of how we can create a subclass out of a superclass. So here you can see class C. So C is the existing class. C is the new class, extends B. So a subclass extends a superclass. So class C is the new class. When we use the keyword extends B means B has to be an existing class. Okay, if B is not there, then you will get an error. So class C extends B. So when you do this, when you write this code, this keyword extends, and you give a name of an existing class, then C automatically becomes the subclass of the class B.